For those that may not be totally familiar with Do No Harm, it came out of Dr. Marshall Wallace's work and Mary Anderson, and this was back in the 1990s. So it's based on the premise that there are elements in society which divide people from each other, and they serve as sources of tension. And then there are also what they call the connectors, which are the elements in which people are connected and enable local capacities for peace. There's a difference between conflict sensitive programming and peace building, which is that conflict sensitive programming is just simply working in conflict. We do that in a lot of our programs. We are operating within conflict contexts. Working on conflict is seeking to mitigate those, what we understand to be the dividers, and enabling those that we see as the connectors. So if you look at it as a spectrum, the bottom part of the doing no harm, as I mentioned, is basically the bare minimum. Acting upon that harm that we see is taking the corrective action to minimize the negative effects, and then maximizing the increase between connectors to reduce the drivers of conflict. So how can we build those connections so that people engage rather than foment additional or further grievances? Moving into peace building, it's really integrating peace building elements into conflict sensitivity development and HA programming. This is where we seek to identify bright spots, which is where are things working well? How do we want to capitalize on those things? Are there opportunities to replicate those things? And how can we do it effectively within our development programming or in our humanitarian assistance programming? And lastly, building peace is really what it is. It's addressing the key drivers of conflict and peace and developing positive relationships between adversarial groups that didn't interact before. This commonly be referred to as reconciliation. The Office of Conflict and Violence Prevention has an earmark of $26 million to go specifically towards what they call people-to-people programming or reconciliation work, otherwise known as the Reconciliation Fund. And this is specifically designed to undertake peace-building program in conflict environments. So that's the spectrum that, as we think about this, are we taking a conflict sensitive approach, or are we taking a peace building approach, or is there some sort of line in the middle where we may not be working directly on conflict, but we have opportunities to affect the conflict context in a positive way?